start the meeting. I appreciate your patience, and if I had gold stars, I'd give them to you all for being here early and on time, and for the folks who came in late, that's great because you're here and we can get going, so thank you. All right, I hereby call this special town meeting to order. I'd like to recognize the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Lou Stone, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. It's our tradition at the start of the annual town meeting in the spring to recognize those who we've lost that have worked for the town in various capacities, and we'll still do that in the spring. But I do want to take a moment to ask for a moment of silence for two people that I think are very well known in this town who passed away over the summer, and I do this at the risk of perhaps missing someone else, and we'll do this again in the spring. But I think everyone in this room knows and knew James Tiny Brown. Tiny was a regular for many, many years in town politics, in town government, very active at town meeting. He hadn't been here for a while, mainly because of health reasons, and for those of you who were here in the spring, you may remember that Tiny came to speak on an issue that was very near and dear to his heart, and that was obtaining more land to build a new fire station. And Tiny spoke, and as he was being rolled down the aisle, I introduced him, just came to my mind as the mayor of Pembroke, and people stood up and gave him a round of applause and a standing ovation. And little did we know that was the last town meeting that Tiny would speak at. But we lost him earlier this summer. And then in August, he wasn't a Pembroke resident, but someone who was very familiar to many people. He served us for several terms in the legislature as a state rep in the 70s and again in the 80s and 90s. Charlie Mann passed away suddenly. He was a town moderator in his town for 20 years in Hanson. Very well known, very well liked state representative. So I'm just going to ask for a moment of silence in memory of those two. Thank you. Thank you. Once again, we welcome you to the meeting. We have, what? 150 even. Wow, that's... And we need 150 to start. Now that I've banged the gavel, we can, the quorum is reduced to 100, but I hope the 150 stay and we get some more folks in. We do have a visitor section up in the corner up there. If you're sitting up there and you're a visitor, you're certainly welcome. If you're sitting up there, you won't be counted if you're a resident. We do have one exception, and I'd like to welcome Amelia from Hobbermock School, who any third grader from Hobbermock School gets to sit right in the main body. So she's here with her mom, and we welcome her here tonight, her first town meeting. For those who are new, just very briefly, we ask you to speak through the chair and at the microphones. I will try to recognize people in the order in which they stand up. The only exception to that is if you want to raise a point of order, and you can just jump up as loud as you can and say, Mr. Moderator, point of order. And a point of order is, quite frankly, anything you want it to be. We can't debate under a point of order, but if you don't understand what's going on, if you can't hear, if there's some procedural matter you're questioning, if you question the vote or the call of the vote by the moderator, any of those are fair play for points of order, and just stand up and I'll recognize you. But other than that, we ask you to approach the microphone. If it's difficult for you to get to the microphone, these are wireless mics. Just ask one of the tellers. Can we ask the tellers to raise their hands? By the way, they've all been sworn in. They're back there. Also, if you don't have a warrant, raise your hand and they'll make sure you get one. But just ask the tellers for the microphone and I'm sure they'll pass it to you. Once again, as always, Carol Dodge faithfully is selling coffee and sweets out there to benefit the Key Club. I want to introduce our state rep who's with us, Josh Cutler, who's standing at the back. As I mentioned, the tellers have been sworn in, and the moderator is satisfied that the warrant for the meeting has been properly posted, so we will dispense with the reading of the warrant and the notice. I do have one announcement. which I may have to get to shortly because I can't find my piece of paper. It's regarding absentee voting, and we'll get to that in a minute. I'll find it. One slight order of business that we always have to do, you will see that there are several articles that by statute require a 2/3 vote. And so bond counsel doesn't get upset, and we don't have to do a standing vote for each and every one of those. Typically, I ask you to give me permission to declare a 2/3 vote. So Mr. Boyle moves that if a 2/3 vote is required by statute, the moderator is authorized to declare a 2/3 vote if, after a show of hands, the moderator determines that the 2/3 majority has been reached. Provided, however, that if a vote so declared is immediately questioned by 7 or more voters, the moderator shall verify the 2/3 majority by ordering a standing count of the yeas and nays. Is there a second? Chair, his second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes voted, and the motion carries, and we are ready to do business. There's quite a number of articles, and as we've said before, this meeting is important because of the fact that we need to balance the budget so the assessors can set the tax rate. But there are financial implications to everything we do, and a good part of this meeting, in preparation of this meeting, has been spent with the town administrator, the selectmen, and the advisory committee, and trying to determine what are appropriate figures and what their recommendations should be. So prior to the start of the meeting, I wanted to recognize the chairman of the advisory committee, Linda Peterson, just to mention a few words.
Mr. Moderator, before we get started, I would like to have the town accountant, Michael Buckley, speak to the issues that are before the town, is both financial for this year and what's proposed to be a very difficult year next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Michael Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I've been asked to take a few minutes and talk about the state of the town's finances, give you an update on last fiscal year, this fiscal year, and even touch on what we're looking at for next fiscal year, fiscal 18. Our fiscal 16 free cash has been certified at $2.25 million, and that's a couple $1,000s off of what it was last year, and that is about 4% of budget. And when I say free cash, that's basically unspent money from budgets from town meeting a year and a half ago, and any revenues that come in excess of our allowable estimates. So before, the one thing we have to do tonight that's most important is we have to clear the books for fiscal 16. And that means we have to use that free cash to pay for last year's snow and ice deficit. And that deficit now remains on the balance sheet. It's $537,000. We're going to be asked to do that later. The other order of business that we usually take up in the fall, or one of the other, is that we funded our one-time capital items. Once the dust is settled, we know where we stand, we know what we have left. The department heads this year have submitted about 24 proposals, and as always, they've been very responsible, and we'll be able to fund almost all of those tonight. The one exception, as you'll see on the warrant, there is an athletic field article from the school committee, and that will not be voted on tonight, as far as I know, but instead the school committee and school administration is working on a plan to bring that back to us in May. We also, in the fall, put money into our savings accounts, and tonight we're going to ask you to do that to 4. We have the sick and vacation buyback, stabilization, retiree health insurance, and the new workers' comp fund that we plan to set aside money for our future liabilities. We do have a piece of good news. In one article, we're asking to spend less money, and that is because our treasurer, Kathleen McCarthy, was able to finance a good portion of our debt, and therefore we're going to ask you to decrease our interest budget by about $400,000, and because most of this debt was for debt exclusion votes, basically for the 5 schools, the construction of the 5 schools, this will directly lower the tax rate. Other than that, we have a few routine articles, and we have the Community Preservation Committee's proposal to consider. At the end of the night, we'll still be left with a substantial remaining balance of free cash, and that was by design because the challenges that we will face next May, balancing the budget for fiscal 18. It is going to be very difficult to maintain the class sizes, the police, fire, and other town staffing that we're accustomed to, given the increases in health insurance that we faced this year and what looks like we'll be facing next year. 10 years ago, health insurance cost the town $5 million. Next year, it looks like it's going to be well in excess of $8 million, and that money has to come from somewhere. So, other than that, thank everyone for attending and helping us get this done.
Thank you for that explanation. And as you know, we have the lottery system here at the town meeting, and so we go by lottery. There's one article that has to be taken up for another, after another. If that comes first, we'll entertain a motion to take it out of order. We're very high tech in Pembroke, as you know. I think, was this your lunch? But we'll draw the first article, and which is Article 2, is the first item for consideration. And the chair recognizes from advisory Stephen Curley.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the sum of $250,000 be appropriated and transferred from free cash to be added to the amount voted in Article 16 of the November 4, 2003 special town meeting to fund separation pay benefits.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by Steve Curley, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 15. Chair recognizes from the DPW, Jason Federico.
Move that $30,000 be appropriated for the cost of a feasibility space needs study by the Department of Public Works, that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $30,000 under GL Chapter 44, Section 721, and/or Section 722, and/or any other enabling authority, and that the Board of Selectmen authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this project. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of the issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such cost by a like amount.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? The chair recognizes Doc Yacobucci.
I'm a businessman. I don't need to pay somebody to tell me that I have a need. You're running a business of running the town's DPW. Why do you have to pay $30,000 for somebody to tell you what your needs are? I'm sure you don't know what your needs are already. Secondly, how does this dovetail in with the proposal that we see posted out in the lobby that you want, I presume, to build a new garage and other facilities? Could you explain the interface?
Chair recognizes Jason Federico.
This article is to study the existing facility as well as future needs for the department. So yes, we don't know all the building codes that are applicable to that existing facility, as well as the exact size and nature of the building we would need for the future needs of the town of Pembroke. No, we do not have that in-house to know exactly what size building, number of bays, truck wash, the whole 9 yards, that we don't have that capabilities in-house to determine that.
You have to speak to the microphone and through the chair.
What's out in the lobby is just, right now, the current facility was built in 1955, has deficiencies of no ventilation for the diesel fumes. Diesel fumes are carcinogen. There's asbestos in the existing facility. There is inadequate storage, as well as no truck wash, which is a phase 2 stormwater violation. So that out there is just showing what the existing facility is. That will be studied as part of it, as well as if that facility can't be retrofitted, then what a new facility would be for the department.
Chair recognizes if you could state, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, if you could state your name and street when you come to the microphone.
Mary Beth Courtwright, Fairwood Drive. Just have a question. If we're doing a feasibility study on a building, are we going to be asked next year to vote 200,000 on a new building and or to borrow that money? And in the fiscal climate that we're in and we're expecting in fiscal year 18, is that even feasible? So I'm not sure. I guess what I'm asking is if you're looking to be asking for that money in next year or not asking for it, why should we spend 30,000 now and waste it?
Chair recognizes Jason Federico.
The concept in our minds was to find out what the needs would be for the town so it can be financially planned for in the future whenever that spending is available in line with the fire departments last year and police. We don't want to be behind and then come 2 years after they've gotten their money for their new facility saying, hey, by the way, we need a facility too, and we didn't plan for it as a town.
Chair recognizes Dan Trabuco from the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the DPW is doing the right thing. They're going about the process the right way with this article. As the previous speaker just mentioned, we will be in tough times going forward. So we need to make sure of the true needs for the DPW. They are right now in a crunch for their equipment, where to store it, how to store it. They will need new facilities. So this study will give us the true meaning of the true need of what they'll be asking for. So I think they're going about it the right way, and I think this needs assessment is very important for us to undertake.
The chair would point out that there is an error, the only error, in the warrant. It says advisory committee's recommendation is take no action, and that's an error, I believe, correct? The advisory committee has recommended favorable action on the motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, yes. Chair, okay. Seeing none, this is an item that requires a 2/3. We'll do it by a show of hands first. If it's too close, then we'll do a standing vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 15 by Jason Federico, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. I declare it so voted, having reached the necessary 2/3 needed for passage. Article 12. Chair recognizes Jim McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Article XX, Police Regulations, Section 9, by deleting and renaming this section as follows. Section 9, door-to-door solicitation, and further by inserting the language as shown in Appendix A of this special town meeting warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Appendix A is in the back of the warrant.
It's six or seven pages. I'd just as soon not read it.
Well, the chief has, fortunately. And the chair recognizes Chief Rick Wall from the police department.
About a year ago, the police department received a live fingerprint machine through the grant from the sheriff's department.
Chief, is that on? It is? Okay. All right. Why don't you...
Mr. Moderator, usually not being heard is not one of my traits. That's better. About a year ago, the police department received a live scan fingerprint machine. We're able to do instant checks on people for firearms, for employment, and the town having door-to-door solicitations. We had a bylaw for hawkers, peddlers, transient vendors, door-to-door sales, and we want to incorporate the ability to do national fingerprint checks on everybody so that when we do a background check on somebody that's going to be going door-to-door, we do that. And one of the things that this process also incorporates is a no solicitation buyout. If somebody does not want to have solicitors go door-to-door at their house, they can contact the Board of Selectmen through email, through telephone, through fax, through in-person, through smoke signal, however they take it, and get their name on a list or address on a list. So when the applications go through the Board of Selectmen and they approve those people to go door-to-door, they'll get a list saying these are the properties don't go to. They'll go over to the police station, they'll get a thorough check, and they'll have an ID card made so that you know if somebody comes to your door, they've been vetted at least through the system. That's this bylaw.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, is there any further discussion? Chair recognizes Doc Yakabuchi.
Okay, I did a quick reading of the text, and it's very impressive. I'd like to know who wrote it and what they used as reference, because it certainly doesn't look like something that was written casually. It's very detailed.
Chair recognizes Chief Wall.
I'm going to give Mr. Thorne the credit for this.
Chair recognizes
Jim Kincaid,
Jim Kincaid.
69 Spring Street. Does this bill include politicians coming from door to door?
The chair recognizes Chief Wall.
Sorry, sir, but no. This bill is very similar to ones I was reading in Burlington that was passed in 2014. Number 13, Article 13, is a similar type of thing for use of the live scan machine. They're been vetted through the DCGIS Corey people from the state, so it's pretty much boilerplate wording. So you're right, Doc, we borrowed what we could to make it legal.
Is there any further discussion, thank you, Chief, on this item? Seeing none, it just requires a simple majority. All those in favor of the motion by Jim McCollum, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 11. Chair recognizes Timothy Brennan from Advisory.
Move that the sum of $17,371 be appropriated and transferred from free cash to be expended under the direction of the Board of Selectmen for town-wide celebrations and commemorations.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. The chair recognizes Libby Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a question, and then I'd like to amend this motion. And I guess I will direct my question either to Advisory or Selectmen. This article does not specify what could be characterized as a town-wide celebration and commemoration. The remaining funds in the 300th anniversary committee, I know at the end of the 275th, when we disbanded the 275th committee, the funds that were remaining, much less than this, were delegated towards a historic project, and that was fine. I'm not comfortable with the language, the way it's worded here, and I'd like to amend it very simply so that the town celebrations are town-sponsored. And I would like to take the word "wide" out of the amendment and insert the word "sponsored." And the reason for this, folks, is that this was money raised for the town-wide celebration of the 300th anniversary, which happened, 4 years ago.
And I think if we're going to take the monies left over in that account and we're going to designate them to be spent for a celebration or a commemoration, it should be something sponsored by the town and not by any group. So by amending this motion from town-wide to town-sponsored, I think that accomplishes that task. And
We just ask you to put it in writing. Is there a second to Libby's amendment? Motion. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll first vote on the amendment, which changes the word "y" to sponsored, town-sponsored. All those in favor of Libby's amendment, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. And the main motion as amended, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 10. And the chair recognizes Betty Monks from advisory.
Mr. Moderator, move that $50,000 be appropriated for the cost of drainage improvements relating to the Route 14 reconstruction project, non-participating agreement, drainage, that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $50,000 under GL 44 S71 or any other enabling authority, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this project. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of insurance of such bonds and notes, may be applied to the payment of cost approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a borrowing authorization, requires 2/3. All those in favor of the motion by Betty Monks, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Before we go to the next item of business, I found my note, and the town clerk asked me to remind folks about early voting, which is something that's new, was not done in the primary, if I remember correctly, but is being done for the first time, thanks to our legislature passing a law earlier this year. There is a difference between absentee voting and early voting. Absentee ballots are available in the clerk's office now. Technically, they are only to be cast if you're not going to be around on Election Day, which is Tuesday, November 8th. However, early voting will start Monday, October 24th, and you can vote in the clerk's office in the town hall from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So that does not start till October 24th. 9 to 5 at the town hall. If you have any questions, you can contact the clerk's office. October 19th, which is coming up tomorrow, is the last day you can register to vote for the November 8th election. Everyone here is registered, so it doesn't apply to you, but for others that may be watching or listening, state election, the town clerk's offices will be open until 8 tomorrow for purposes of registering for November 8th. Next item of business is Article 4. Chair recognizes Jim McCollum from advisory.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Move that the town appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $537,347 for the purpose of balancing the budget and reducing the tax rate for the fiscal year 2017.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion by Jim McCollum, please raise your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and I declare it unanimous that we want to reduce the tax rate. Next article is Article 6. Chair recognizes Steve Walsh from Advisory.
Thank you. Move that the town vote to reduce the amounts voted under Article 3 of the May 10, 2016 annual town meeting for maturing debt interest from $939,925 to $521,105.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. This is the article that the accountant referred to earlier. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and I declare it unanimous. Article 7. Chair recognizes Linda Peterson, Chairman of the Advisory Committee.
Mr. Moderator, move that the town vote to accept the provisions of Chapter 41, Section 111F of the General Laws inserted by Section 60 of Chapter 218 of the Acts of 2016, which is effective on November 7, 2016, and establishes a special injury leave indemnity fund for the purpose of establishing and appropriating amounts for the payment of leave injury compensation or medical bills incurred under Chapter 41, Section 111F or 100 of the General Laws. The fund to begin operation on November 7, 2016.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 13.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Chair recognizes John Brown.
Move that the town vote to amend General Bylaws Article 20, Police Regulations, by inserting new Section 9.1 named Criminal History Check Authorization, as shown in Appendix B of this special town meeting warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded, and the chair recognizes Chief Wall.
Yeah, this is the Part B of the first one that we did, and this allows us to establish uniform policies and procedures to collect and submit civil fingerprints for licensing that the Board of Selectmen award to people, hawkers, peddlers, door-to-door sales, hackney drivers, ice cream and food vendors, etc. And it also allows us to collect the municipal fees that we need to offset. The state charges us $30 to run the fingerprints through their system, and we're going to collect another $30 and set it into a revolving account to pay for the maintenance for the machine that we got for free, but it didn't come with a maintenance policy. So it kind of gives us a little bit of a insurance policy.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any further discussion? Chair recognizes Doc Iacobucci.
Is a hackney driver the same thing as an Uber driver? In other words, your law says it's going to cover hackney drivers, which I think means a licensed taxi company. Question is it also going to cover the individual that volunteers and participates in the Uber system, internet system?
Chair recognizes Chief Wall.
My understanding that Mr. Moderator, is a hackney driver is a operator of a conveyance. I'm not sure how that works out with Uber, and if Doc Iacobucci knows, I'd be more than glad to listen.
I don't know, that's why I asked, but I'm hoping it doesn't cover the Uber people, because these are average citizens that are trying to make a few extra bucks volunteering their time. So I don't think it should cover them.
Chair recognizes Andy Wandell.
Yeah, Andy Wandell, Oldham Street. It does say here, it is unclear, because it says here owner or operator of public conveyance, and would that include a Lyft or Uber driver as well? Just a question.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm sorry.
I'm short. I'm not that short.
Chair recognizes Sabrina Chilcott.
If I'm not mistaken, the specific bylaw references anyone who applies for a license or a permit through the Selectman's office. No Uber driver applies for a permit or a license through the Selectman's office. It's not required.
Chair recognizes
Becky
Becky
Coletta,
Coletta.
Vernon Hall Drive. I'm just wondering if we could have town council respond to those questions about Uber and Lyft?
Chair recognizes Town Council Joel Bard from
Thank you,
Coleman and
Mr.
Page.
Moderator. Joel Bard. My understanding is that the answer to these questions is no. You may have followed in the news that there was a moderately controversial statewide legislation that was adopted earlier this year, and to the extent there was a controversy, it was generated primarily from the taxi drivers who do have to go through this kind of registration, and they were objecting to the fact that Uber and Lyft and other rideshare drivers would not. So while I haven't researched the question, I'm quite certain the answer to these questions is no, in other words, it will not cover them.
Any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by advisory on Article 13, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 14 is the next item of business. And the chair recognizes Stephen Walsh from advisory.
Thank you. Move that the town vote to create a new revolving fund in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, into which receipts from the state and federal fingerprint-based criminal history checks in the town shall be deposited, and from which disbursements in an amount which shall not exceed $20,000 for fiscal year 2017 may be expended in connection with maintenance of the fingerprint submission and collection program.
Motion's been made and seconded. I believe this is the issue that the chief referred to earlier. Is there any discussion on this article? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by Stephen Walsh, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 17.
Mr. Moderator.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Lou Stone.
Move that the town vote to amend Schedules A, C, and D of the classification and compensation bylaws according to the schedules listed and printed in the amended Appendix C of this special town meeting warrant, and to raise and appropriate from free cash the sum of $56,564 to fund the changes, and further to authorize the town accountant to allocate the funds to the appropriate budget items voted under Article 3 of the 2016 annual town meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded. Chair recognizes Lou Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a word of explanation, if I may. The Board of Selectmen is currently acting as the Wage and Personnel Board, and we are allowed to set salaries and wages of our employees who are not employed under the conditions of a collective bargaining agreement. And the result of this article was arrived at by doing comparison salaries with other towns and also using surveys and interviews of the people that are involved in this suggested increase in salary. Thank you.
Chair recognizes our Chief Librarian and Webmaster, Deb Wall.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to actually build a little bit on what Lou Stone said, and he addressed it very well. They are wage and personnel. So as you can see, there are several library positions here. In the spring, a group of town employees had these adjustments made. This is finishing the group, if you will. And as he said, a lot of study went into the setting of the rates. We did a lot of comparisons to comparable sized libraries, towns, other town employees, and this is like the median of where it would be to bring the staff up to where it would be. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion made by Lou Stone, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 8. Chair recognizes Steve Curley from Advisory.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the sum of $50,000 be appropriated and transferred from free cash and added to the Special Injury Leave Indemnity Fund authorized by Article 7 of this town meeting.
Any discussion on this matter? Chair recognizes Doc Yakabuchi.
It says here that the purpose of this is to allow the town to avoid having to purchase insurance to cover these unforeseen costs, which is another way of saying we're going to be on the hook 100% for these costs. I don't see where this makes any sense. I mean, the whole purpose of insurance is to cover future uncertainties for a fixed fee that you can cover and afford, as opposed to being liable for an unlimited amount of money. What if somebody gets hurt and it's $1 million cost?
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The town under 111F, the town is liable either way to both pay the public safety employee wages and their medical costs. Right now, we pay insurance, we buy insurance, and that means someone in the middle or a couple layers in the middle make profits when they sell us that insurance in return for taking the risk. What we're trying to do is set aside a pot of money over a couple years, build up a reserve so that we don't have to pay the middlemen the profit, and we can just have a ongoing program where the town only pays the cost and doesn't pay any outside administrative overhead or risk premium.
Chair recognizes Doc Yakabuchi.
Michael, if I understood what you're saying, we presently have insurance, and we're going to continue to have insurance until somebody decides we've got enough in the pot to cover the future risks. Is that what you just said?
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
That is correct. We're trying to build up a reserve so we do not have to buy a premium, correct?
Chair recognizes...
And who's going to make
Doc, we've got to give someone else, and then we can get back to you. Not previously spoken, if you could just state your name.
Hi, Catherine Harkins. I live on Pine Mill Drive. I think my question is similar to this other gentleman's, which is, do we have the actuarial expertise to determine how much money we need in that fund at some future point in order to make that decision about removing ourselves and going self-funded in the insurance?
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This fund was just allowed or authorized by the legislature and the governor about 2 months ago. So we are not anywhere near the point where we are ready to hire an actuary or be self-insured or self-sufficient, but this instead is the first step towards achieving that.
Chair recognizes Doc Yakabuchi.
So the question is, who is going to make the decision that we've got enough money in the pot to cover these unforeseen expenditures? Who's authorized to make that decision for the town?
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
Just like any other decision that will be made by the Board of Selectmen, myself, town administrator, vetted by the advisory committee and brought to this assembly.
Any further discussion on this matter? Chair recognizes former Selectman Paul Dwyer.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, through you to the town accountant. Historically, what has the insurance paid out for these claims? And that would give us some idea of how long it would take us to build up a pool to pay out at least 1 year's worth of claims, if not multi-years worth of claims.
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
Actually, believe it or not, of the 50 uniformed personnel we have, plus or minus, some years we haven't paid out anything. And other years we've had major injuries when we've paid out over $100,000 for one claim.
Chair recognizes Becky Coletta.
Hi, Becky Coletta, 23 Vernon Hall Drive. I guess what I'm unclear on, is this fund going to completely replace a workers' compensation type fund? Insurance, not a fund, for these types of claims. I mean, I guess my concern would be what would happen if, you know, the worst-case scenario, we had a mass casualty involving members of our town employees. It has been known to happen, and it seems like we could burn through money. I'd like to know if there's going to be a backstop there.
Chair recognizes Mike Buckley.
Well, 111F has limits on what we are responsible for and what we can do, but the fact remains, if a public safety employee gets injured, we're responsible for that in the lost wages. Whether we build up reserves and self-insure, or whether we buy an insurance policy, which also I should have said, most insurance policies that we can obtain have limits, and then we're on the hook for anything over and above the limit. So one way or another, we're on the hook. It's just how do you want to pay for it?
Any further discussion on this article? Good questions, good answers. All those in favor of the motion by Steve Curley of Advisory on Article 8, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 1. Chair recognizes Linda Peterson.
Mr. Moderator, this is a two-part motion. How do you want it?
We'll do the first one first.
Okay. Move that the sum of $507,521 be appropriated to fund capital projects and equipment in accordance with the capital budget schedule appearing in Article 1 of the warrant, excluding unmarked police cruisers and mini pumper fire engine, including the funding source for each project listed therein, and that to meet this appropriation, $157,000 shall be transferred from water surplus and $350,521 shall be transferred from free cash.
Is there any discussion on the motion? The second part will be the borrowing authorization, which requires a 2/3. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion by Linda Peterson, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it unanimous. Chair recognizes Linda Peterson.
Mr. Moderator, move that the sum of $320,000 be appropriated to fund the purchase of unmarked police cruisers and mini pumper fire engine in accordance with the capital budget schedule appearing in Article 1 of the warrant, and that to meet this appropriation, that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow $321,000 under GL Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 9, or any other enabling authority, and that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out these projects. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote shall, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of insurance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, and the chair recognizes Plymouth County Commissioner and former Selectman Greg Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I rise in support of this article, but I would ask that when the procurement phase of these vehicles take place, that the town contact the county, which has put together a procurement of public safety vehicles on behalf of the member communities at a significant savings to the communities. So I support it, and would just ask that you consider purchasing it from the Plymouth County vehicle bid, because the money comes back to the town in the form of program. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion, which does require a 2/3? All those in favor of the motion by Linda Peterson on this article, the second motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it unanimous. Article 18. This article, and typically how we handle these articles that deal with community preservation money, I will recognize the chair of the CPC committee, Brian Van Riper. We will take each recommendation separately as a separate vote. So the first one will be on recommendation A, and the chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Move that the town transfer the sum of $25,000 to the Community Preservation Act Fund Reserve, which was appropriated in Article 10, Recommendation H, at the special town meeting on November 13th, 2012, for a building study of the Pembroke Community Center.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this article, on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by Brian Van Riper, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Recommendation B, the chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Move that the town transfer the sum of $25,000 to the Community Preservation Act Fund Reserve and the sum of $35,000 to the Community Housing Reserve, totaling $60,000, which was appropriated in Article 16, Recommendation F, at the special town meeting held October 28th, 2014, for a Pembroke Housing Authority site design project.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Recommendation C, the chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Move that the sum of $55,800 be appropriated from FY17 estimated annual revenues, and that said funds be used by the trustees of First Church for Phase 2 of the ongoing restoration and replacement of pillars, trim, windows, and shutters.
Motion's been made and seconded, and the chair recognizes Doc Iacobucci.
Is this a request that town public funds be used to fund a private church?
Chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
That's correct.
I believe that's illegal.
No, it's not.
Chair recognizes Arthur Boyle.
Doc, the case was just decided in Acton. I'm passing my law degree, Joe, within the last 2 weeks. And it speaks to the significance of the historical value of the building rather than religion. So this could go to a Protestant church, a Catholic church, a temple, or whatever, as long as it had historical significance. And they do have the town clock in their tower, so we're kind of inseparable with the First Congregation.
Chair recognizes Libby Bates from the Historical.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a quick question to Mr. Van Riper. Has a preservation restriction been recorded on this project to date, which is a requirement?
Chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
We don't have a preservation restriction in place to date, but it will be in place prior to the distribution of these funds.
Okay, prior to the distribution. It's a
Chair recognizes
procedural
Libby
thing that's
Bates.
important. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by Brian on recommendation C, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Recommendation D, Chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Move on this matter, Mr. Moderator, that we take no action on Article 18, Recommendation D. Take no action.
A motion's been made and seconded to take no action, which means we will take no action. It's pretty self-explanatory. However, it's your decision whether you want to take no action on it or not. Obviously, that's a recommendation. Chair recognizes Doc Iacobucci.
Is this the property at 14 and 53 that we purchased recently?
Chair recognizes
Yes.
Brian Van Riper.
Yes, that is the land in question.
So I'm confused.
Chair recognizes
If we
Doc
own the
Iacobucci.
property, why aren't we spending money to do what is necessary to use the property?
Chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
The acquisition of the property precedes the motion in this case to approve funds. CPA funds are somewhat limited in their ability to simply go back and provide for appropriation for something that's already been purchased by the town, in this case, the land.
I guess, so we don't need him. I get it.
Any further discussion? On the motion by Brian to take no action on recommendation D, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Recommendation E, the chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Move that the sum of $4,200 be appropriated from fiscal year 17 estimated annual revenues, and that said funds be used by the Pembroke Youth Baseball to install on-deck cages on Field A at the Mattakesett Street baseball fields.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on this matter? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it unanimous. Recommendation F, the chair recognizes Brian Van Riper.
Move that the sum of $9,200 be appropriated from fiscal year 17 estimated annual revenues, and that said funds be used by Pembroke Youth Baseball to replace fencing on Field A at the Mattakesett Street baseball fields.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on this final recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare that motion unanimous.
Thank you.
Winding our way down, Article 3 is the next item of business. Chair recognizes Timothy Brennan from Advisory.
Move that the sum of $25,000 be appropriated and transferred from free cash to be added to the stabilization fund.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, the ayes have it, and I declare it so voted, having reached the necessary two-thirds necessary for passage. That needed a two-thirds vote, but it was unanimous, which is better than two-thirds. Next article is Article 5. Chair recognizes John Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Move that the town appropriate and transfer from free cash the sum of $250,000 to be added to the other post-employment benefits liability fund established by the vote of Article 11 of the April 24th, 2012 annual town meeting.
Any discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. Article 16. Chair recognizes Betty Monks.
Action. Move to take no action on Article 16.
Is there a second? Chair hears second. Again, this is Chair recognizes from the school committee.
Suzanne
Scroggins, I'm sorry.
Prince Way, yes, I'm on the school committee. School committee would like to withdraw this motion with the intent of bringing it back in the Springtown meeting on a special warrant, and we will have clearly identified funding sources at that time.
Again, your decision. All those in favor of the motion to take no action on Article 16, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. And the final item of business is Article 9. Chair recognizes Steve Curley.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $101,527 from free cash to fund a new collective bargaining agreement between the town of Pembroke and the Pembroke Patrolmen's Association for the period from July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2017.
Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this article? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion by Stephen Curley, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes have it, and I declare it so voted. And that is our last item of business. The chair would like to thank you for your attendance. We may have set a world record for a special town meeting, and we'll see you in the spring. Arthur Boyle moves that the meeting stand in adjournment. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.